Let me introduce myself. I'm Sid Smith, and I'm the director of the Institute for the Humanities, and I welcome you all here. This is a wonderful event. In a minute, our curator, Amanda Kruliak, is going to introduce Lynne, but right now, I just want to say a couple words about the name of the lecture. So Lynne is giving a lecture and a tour of the exhibits called Of the Making of Many Books, There Is No End, and it is the Jill S. Harris Memorial Lecture. That name comes from the name of an undergraduate student, Jill S. Harris, who died in a car crash while she was an undergraduate here, and that occurred in 1985. And her parents, Roger and Meredith Harris, who live in Chicago, then endowed a lecture series in Jill's name. So we have an annual lecture in Jill's name. Lynne is also the Jill Harris Visiting Fellow or Artist. And as part of her project here at the Institute, we've had the pleasure of her teaching a course, an undergraduate mini course. She has 16 undergraduates in this course on bookmaking. So we're very pleased that she has come here, that we have an exhibit of hers, that she's teaching a course for us, and that today she's giving this lecture. So without any more ado, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda, who will introduce Lynne.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's so great to have everybody here, and I just want to say, personally, the great pleasure I derive out of our communities meeting and us working on projects that bring Detroit to us and us to Detroit. So I'm just thrilled at the attendance and at the exchange. I also wanted to say on a personal note that working with Lynne has just been marvelous, and I so value that experience. And in terms of considering her for an exhibition and bringing her to the Institute, it was always her practice and the way she moves through the world, how she exists, what she offers and contributes in terms of art, in terms of community. And I have great respect for the integrity of her practice and her authenticity. So I wanted to thank you for that and make that remark. There are certainly many, many credits to be listed in terms of Lynne's career. She's been a Kresge recipient. She was an inaugural fellow at the American Academy in Jerusalem. She exhibited at Lemberg Gallery. She was recently speaking at the Library of Congress. And these are just some of many. But I'd really like to make a few remarks specifically about her work and my impressions thus as a curator. The works of Lynne Avadenka are resonant, lyrical, yet precise. Even in conversation with Lynne in the studio, surrounded by the press, the links, the marks, the length of table, and the words, one is left with the same impression. It is the combination of things, this infinite gesture built within her exacting compositions that engages us. It is at once sequential and also breaking code. Lynne has an inherent respect for process. She often begins with a passage or a piece of text that may be meaningful in regards to content or in terms of its relationship to some personal experience she has in real time. Some texts serve as markers for a place or a journey. Others refer to history, identity, or daily rituals. While in Germany for an artist residency, Avadenka incorporated pages of a German dictionary into her prints, and while in Jerusalem as a fellow with the American Academy, she composed collages to mark her stay, using texts from the daily Arabic and Hebrew news. She is likely as inspired by ancient texts as lines of contemporary poets. From the onset, she is particular, even idiosyncratic in her methodology. And all of this serves as an overlay for what she inevitably creates, where each step of the process informs the other, from text to image and so on. And what is remarkable is you don't really know where one ends and one begins. Text and image seem to become a constant translation that is moving freely. Lynne Avadenka is a visual artist, a printmaker, a maker of books, a conceptualist, a realist, rooted in tradition and also thoroughly modern. And central to her creative process is really her deep appreciation and relationship to the book, to this dog-eared companion that has been a ritual in all of our lives. It is nothing short of love. It is passionate. It is thoughtful. It's about inquiry. It considers spiritual origins and physicality, and it's enormous in our lives despite our awareness of impermanence. And then after all of this commitment, this myriad of affirmations of the book, she takes it all apart. She deconstructs it, the entire notion of the book. And that is the spirit of a true revolutionary. In a digital age, Avadenka's life work collectively is an expanse, searching, seeking, and still uncharted. In the beginning of things and the end of things. It is the unfolding, Avadenka's infinite gesture that continues to challenge us. I would love to introduce at this time Lynne Avadenka.
I could really just leave now and show you the work, but I wrote this, so I'm going to say it. Thank you very much, Amanda. And I'm going to begin with thank yous. So thank you to the Institute for the Humanities, the Institute Director, Sid Smith, Amanda Krugliak for that beautiful introduction, and for everything else that's happened here. Thank you also to Peggy Daub, who's curator and outreach librarian of the Special Collections Library here at the University of Michigan, for all the opportunities extended to me as a visiting artist fellow, the invitation to speak to you today, the exhibitions of my work that are here in this building, the class I'm teaching, the interactions with students, and for the beautiful catalog that I hope all of you will pick up if you haven't already. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming. What I'm going to do is begin by first speaking more formally here about ideas in my work. And then, I hope, you'll want to come with me into the gallery on the first floor and the space here on the second floor, where I can talk more specifically about the art that's there and answer questions and have a bit more of a conversation with you. Oh, I forgot my water. So, to begin, a clever girl from Victorian England, a French poet writing in the mid-1880s. This is what Garrison Keillor does. He just throws it on the floor. An artist revolutionary from the Stalin-era Soviet Union, a contemporary Scottish writer with an international reach, and finally, a cranky biblical philosopher. What do they all have to do with me and the books I make? Let's begin with the cranky, jaded philosopher of the book of Ecclesiastes. His words provide the title of my talk, of the making of many books. But some of you may know the full passage, which is, beware, of the making of many books there is no end. And it seems I have ignored his warning. It began when I made a book in grade school, writing the story, lettering the pages, making a design on the cover with a wood burner, bound it with metal hinges. I got a Speedwall calligraphy set, along with an instruction manual around the same time. I found myself sometime later in graduate school, standing in the basement, it's always in the basement, of the art building, learning how to set type, print letterpress, and bind books. And here I am now, 30 years after graduate school, talking to you about books, in particular the many books I've made, and the artwork I've made influenced by books. That clever Victorian girl is Alice, who, in spending time musing about many things while in Wonderland, said, "What is the use of a book without pictures or conversation?" This most basic question suggests that a book must engage its viewer, its reader, and speaks to the participatory nature of the book. The reader has to pick it up, physically interact with it. And as an artist, if I'm working in that format, once I've interested those readers and viewers enough to pick up the book, I better have a way to keep them engaged. That French poet, writing in the mid-1880s, is Stéphane Mallarmé, who said everything in the world exists in order to end up as a book. No idea too trivial, no idea too large to be considered as subject matter to be explored. David Mitchell, the contemporary author of Cloud Atlas, creator of entire worlds in his writing, said this in 2010 in a conversation with an interviewer. Your mind is nowhere else but in this world that started off in the mind of another human being. There are two miracles at work here. One, that someone thought of that world and those people in the first place. And the second, that there's this means of transmitting it. Just little ink marks on squashed wood fiber. Bloody amazing. Here Mitchell is speaking of language as a code, about a book as a container of that code, organizing that information so it can be broken down, understood, and then shared. Words and images are abstractions, and both are codes to be deciphered, and both invite you into the world an artist creates. Finally, these thoughts about books from El Lissitzky, the leader of the Russian constructivist art movement, writing in the 1920s. Build a book like a body moving in space and time, like a dynamic relief in which every page is a surface carrying shapes, and every turn of a page a new crossing to a new stage of a single structure. And this is what I really enjoy, building the book and building it from all directions. Writing the text, finding a form for the text, finding a form for the book, and creating imagery that works with that text. All these quotes connect me to the art I make, inspired by the idea of the book, both its form and content, as a repository of memory and narrative, as a vehicle for transmitting transcendent information, as a singular object binding together a multiplicity of ideas. Here's what I look for when I'm thinking about a new book project, and a book might have one or more or even all of these elements incorporated into its creation. An exquisite text, beautiful language. This is often the starting point for me in a book. The text leads, the imagery is created, but not as a matching illustration, rather as a visual response, or as an answer to the question posed by the text, or an expansion of the thoughts of the text. It might be an opportunity to explore formats and structures, from traditional to a hybrid mix of techniques, searching for the most appropriate staging for what happens in the book. For example, a number of the books that you'll see in the study room, in the Frankel study room, the number of those books are bilingual, Hebrew and English. So there's a challenge to find a binding, a design presentation that gives equal weight to both languages and the direction in which they are written. It might be a compelling character that drives me to create an artist's book. In another one of the books that's in the exhibition, The Uncommon Perspective of M.E.J. Coulter, that character is a woman working as an architect in the American Southwest at the turn of the century. Mary Elizabeth Jane Coulter designed and oversaw the construction of a number of buildings that are still standing at the Grand Canyon. She was remarkable in many ways. She was a woman project manager in the 1920s in charge of a construction crew. She was adamant that the buildings should be built in the style of the people that had been living around the canyon for centuries. So this meant low-slung adobe construction tucked into the landscape, not tall wooden buildings with fussy Victorian decoration. The book I created to tell her story is an orchestration of a number of elements. The text I wrote has 3 chapters, each with architectural references in their titles. The structure of the book echoes the structure of the buildings she designed. The paper specially made for this structure includes some of the same materials found in adobe buildings, the crushed rock of the Southwest and cooked softened straw, and the colors reflect the Southwest landscape. So in this book I wrote the text and created all the elements that make up the edition. But in some cases, it might be a powerful narrative. And in this case, it's a text from another artist, a writer named Bonnie Jo Campbell, who's a Michigan-based writer. And it comes from her short story, The Solution to Brian's Problem. This is from her collection called American Salvage, Bonnie's collection of short stories that was published by Wayne State University Press and was nominated for a National Book Award. Bonnie writes about rural Michigan as well as the methamphetamine industry that has destroyed so many lives in that part of her world where she lives. And so the story is that of a young father faced with terrible choices regarding his addicted wife. The text suggests the form, a puzzle. So to read the story and to solve the puzzle, the reader must physically put the book together. These two selections serve as bookends to the show that's here, selections from my press that are in the special collections. The Uncommon Perspective is from 1992, from the early years of Landmarks Press. And the Solutions to Brian's Problems is from 2011, a more recent edition. And although they are separated by many years, they share many of the same qualities as they do with other books I've created. As Amanda said, an interest in process, in craftsmanship, in the idea of the multiple, and in the combined strength of word and images. When we go over to look at those books, if you're still with me, I'll talk a bit more about all those qualities. In the books I make and in the art I make inspired by books, the goal is to make something evocative, provocative, with enough room and questions asked to bring an audience of one or many into the work. The title of the exhibition in the Institute for Humanities Gallery, Language Comes After Artist, is an example of that search for the right combination of elements, in this case, words. I went to the thesaurus to look for a title for the show. I was looking for something enigmatic with no single interpretation. And literally, as I was leafing through the book, it turns out that in the categories I was searching, the word language comes after the word artist. So it could be that language is coming to get the artist is drowning in words, or it could be that the artist leads, makes the work, and the language to explain follows. Or it could well be that this set of words will be understood by one of you in a way that I haven't even considered. Now a few thoughts about the art that's downstairs in the Institute Gallery. There are a number of themes that you will see here. Again, the idea of the book and the narrative, and also the book's connection to the cinematic, to the idea of, to film, the idea of one frame connecting to one page of the book, forcing movement and transition and narrative across the face of the book. For me, there's a strong interest in the Japanese aesthetic and Japanese book tradition and landscape screens, and you may notice some of that as well. The idea of the scroll unrolled and the pages of a book opening up before you. Also, the beauty and expressiveness of a single drawn line and the idea that we turned the book into a three-dimensional line in the way that we installed the work downstairs. Although the printed works there are monoprints, meaning they were created using printmaking techniques, but each is unique. In the recent prints I've made, I'm more interested in the marks I can make with printing processes, and I'm less interested in making multiple copies. So working with a printing plate as a basic matrix allows for experimentation and spontaneity and often serendipity. Another theme that you'll see there are a repeated use of ovals and the idea of these ovals being an alphabet, one set of symbols representing another. And this began with a series of work I did after September 11th. The hand-drawn ovals stood for lost lives, the idea that one life is an entire galaxy with an orbit that has a huge reach of influence. I continued to use this series of symbols and drawings in books, and then in a search for a way to make my choices, which oval, what size, which orientation, I assigned a letter of the alphabet to each oval. So language turned into landscape. For me, it was a way of using ovals in a way that was less random. It gave a kind of overall structure to my choices. And there are several examples of this alphabet, so-called alphabet, which you'll see in the works in the gallery downstairs. And then another set of symbols representing something else. In this case, it's the words and phrases you'll see in the prints that are in the gallery that bracket that long line of books that you'll see. And these words came from a dictionary that I found in a used bookstore in Jerusalem, which is indeed a city of many books. It was a dictionary of algebraic definitions. in English and in Arabic. And I don't speak Arabic, and I certainly don't speak algebra, but I now understand those who say that mathematics is really quite poetic. The word algebra comes from the word al-jabr, which means the reunion of broken parts. And the words and phrases that I selected from this dictionary and have incorporated into the art that you will see in the gallery are open-ended and leave room for you to enter in. And while they were created in Jerusalem, a beautiful and contentious place, and had a meaningful resonance when exhibited there, I think that translates well in the exhibition here. So let's go back to a few of those quotes from the beginning of my talk for a closer reading and maybe a different reading. What's the use of a book without pictures or conversation? Everything in the world exists in order to end up in a book. Build a book like a body moving in space and time. And of the making of books, there is no end. My assumption is that all of these quotes are talking about physical books, but we can rephrase Alice's words and now ask a different, but not necessarily an easier question in 2013. What is a book, and how do we define it? The British writer Anthony Burgess suggests that a book, and here you have to see the word in capital letters, B-O-O-K, is a box of organized knowledge. And this definition still might work. But even that notion of a box suggests physicality, a material presence. As a visiting artist fellow here, I've been talking and thinking about books a lot. In a discussion about the future of the book, Paul Conway of the School of Information gave a fascinating presentation about the Google project here at the university that is digitizing books. All of these digitized books are actually scanned by human beings, one page spread at a time. This, it would seem obvious, is an incredibly tedious job, and all sorts of interesting evidence of that boredom is visible in many pages of these digital books. Fingers left in the picture frame, jewelry on the fingers, distortion of text when the pages are hurriedly laid on the scanner. So in fact, a new book is created. So while some of the questions are new, some are the same with these books. Who decides what gets saved? What stays in circulation? And even though all these books are digitized and in that form have a new accessibility, they still exist somewhere in storage, still in need of care and conservation. As an artist who makes books, so much of what I do is really paradoxical. I work in a format, the book, that is at once familiar and valued, but is perhaps becoming an object of nostalgia. The books I make are created in small editions, meaning there are not that many of them. The books I make are made by hand, using beautiful materials, which often results in an object that is beyond the reach of a reader, viewer. So often what I makes ends up in an institutional setting, a library or a museum. And when the books are exhibited, they are even less accessible than they are when they are in the library or museum storage. They are behind glass. So the whole experiential nature of reading these special books is impossible. More ironies. But this is the medium I'm working in, just as another artist might choose film or installation or photography to create meaningful work. So I can only hope that the biblical philosopher is not offering a warning, rather a prediction. Of the making of many books, there is no end. Thank you.